In the late summer of 1989, while the world was distracted by summit meetings, nuclear treaties, and the slow crumbling of the Iron Curtain, a quiet moment unfolded in a place no strategist, no general, and no ideologue had ever imagined would matter. It did not happen in the Kremlin. It did not happen at the United Nations. It did not happen on a battlefield or inside a missile silo. It happened in a grocery store. On an ordinary Saturday afternoon in Houston, Texas, a man who stood at the very top of the Soviet political elite pushed open the sliding doors of an American supermarket and walked straight into a reality that would haunt him for the rest of his life. His name was Boris Yeltsin. At the time, Yeltsin was not yet president, but he was no ordinary visitor. He was a member of the Soviet parliament, a former mayor of Moscow, a rising political force, and a man already wrestling with doubts about the system he had served his entire life. He was touring the United States unofficially, invited to observe American society during the final, fragile years of the Cold War. He toured New York. He saw skyscrapers. He visited NASA. He stood before monuments that symbolized American power. None of it impressed him. What shook him, what truly shattered something deep inside, was a supermarket. Yeltsin asked his hosts to show him something simple. Not a factory, not a military base, not a government building. He wanted to see how ordinary Americans lived. So they took him to a Randall's grocery store in the Clear Lake area near Houston. There were no cameras waiting, no crowds, no heavy security. The store manager on duty received a phone call with barely 15 minutes' notice. A foreign dignitary was coming, a Soviet politician. That was all. When Yeltsin entered the store, he did not rush. He did not pose. He did not make speeches. He walked the aisles slowly, quietly, accompanied by an interpreter, and as he moved from shelf to shelf, his expression began to change. He stopped. He stared. He asked questions. Rows of fresh produce stretched out in front of him. Fruits and vegetables in colors many Soviet citizens had never seen outside of photographs. Meat counters overflowing with choices. Bread in dozens of varieties. Dairy products stacked higher than the eye could see. And then there were the frozen foods. In the late 1980s, American supermarkets used open freezer cases, deep, coffin-like containers where customers bent down and reached inside. Yeltsin lingered there. He studied the packaging. He touched the boxes. He asked how much it cost. He asked who could afford it. The answers disturbed him. This food was not reserved for the elite. It was not for party officials. It was not for generals or ministers. It was for everyone. In the Soviet Union, shortages were a fact of life. Even in Moscow, shelves were often bare. Long lines were normal. Imported goods were rare. Fresh produce was seasonal and limited. Variety was a luxury. And yet Soviet propaganda insisted relentlessly that communism had created a superior society, that the USSR rivaled and even surpassed the United States. Standing in that supermarket, Yeltsin realized the lie. Later, he would admit that this moment struck him harder than anything he had seen on his entire trip. Not the Statue of Liberty, not Wall Street, not NASA, a grocery store. He reportedly turned to his companions and said, that if Soviet citizens could see this, there would be a revolution. What haunted him most was not abundance alone. It was normalcy. This was not a luxury market. This was not staged. No one had prepared it for his arrival. These shelves looked like this every day. Yeltsin began to think of home, of Soviet families, of pensioners, of workers, of his own childhood memories of hunger, shaped by collectivization and state control. He thought of how even the Soviet elite, the Politburo itself, did not live like this. The comparison was unbearable. For decades, the Cold War had been framed as a contest of missiles, tanks, ideology, and power. But in that moment, the competition revealed its most human dimension. One system produced fear, scarcity, and sacrifice. The other produced abundance so routine that no one thought twice about it. Yeltsin left the store visibly shaken, and something inside him broke. Back in the Soviet Union, reforms were already underway. Mikhail Gorbachev had introduced perestroika and glasnost in an attempt to save the system by opening it. But Yeltsin now understood that reform was not enough. The problem was not inefficiency, it was the system itself. Communism, as it existed, could not compete, not militarily, not economically, not morally. The supermarket visit did not single-handedly collapse the Soviet Union, but it accelerated a transformation already in motion. Yeltsin became increasingly vocal, increasingly defiant. He distanced himself from the Communist Party. He embraced the language of change, sovereignty, and reform. Within 2 years, the Berlin Wall would fall. Within 3, the Soviet Union would cease to exist, and Boris Yeltsin would become the first president of a post-Soviet Russia. History often remembers leaders for speeches, wars, and treaties. But some of the most consequential moments happen quietly, without witnesses, without applause. A man standing in front of a freezer full of frozen dinners, realizing that everything he had been told was wrong. Decades later, echoes of that moment still resonate. When modern commentators visit grocery stores in rival nations and react with surprise, mockery, or disbelief, they are unknowingly retracing the same psychological terrain. The shelves become symbols, not of food, but of systems, of truth, of failure. Because abundance is not just about consumption, it is about freedom, about choice, about dignity. Yeltsin did not defect that day. He did not give a speech. He did not announce a revolution. He simply saw. And once you see something clearly, you cannot unsee it. The Cold War was not won in a single battle or a single negotiation. It was won in moments like this, when reality quietly overpowered ideology, when everyday life revealed what propaganda could not hide. A supermarket in Texas did what decades of speeches could not. It exposed the truth. And in doing so, it helped bring an empire to its knees.